On a quiet Friday evening in San Diego, a small Italian restaurant glowed with the warmth of candlelight and the hum of families sharing meals. The smell of garlic bread and roasted tomatoes filled the air as couples leaned close over glasses of red wine. At a corner booth sat Chief Petty Officer Emily Carter, 32 years old, finally home after an 18-month deployment in the Middle East. She wore a simple black dress and flats, her hair tucked neatly back. For the first time in months, she wanted to be anonymous, to enjoy the comfort of pasta and silence without anyone knowing who she was. The restaurant carried the energy of a normal night, the scrape of chairs, the clink of cutlery, and the laughter of children at the larger tables. Emily had chosen her seat carefully, with a view of both exits, a habit she had carried from years of operational awareness. To anyone else, she was just another diner waiting for chicken parmesan. But her eyes moved constantly, noting small details the way a sailor scans the horizon. The night felt ordinary, the kind of peace she had missed on distant bases, where meals came in hurried rations and days stretched into desert heat. At the bar, 3 men in expensive suits had been drinking heavily. Their laughter started as background noise but grew sharper, louder, each word cutting through the soft conversations around them. Empty bottles gathered at their elbows. Their jokes carried an edge that shifted from careless to crude, first mocking other patrons, then focusing on women sitting nearby. The bartender's nervous glance and the waiter's hesitant steps showed that no one wanted to confront them. Still, the voices rose. Emily kept her eyes on her meal when it arrived, but her training would not let her tune it out. She could feel the shift in the room as discomfort spread like a quiet ripple. The men's behavior grew bolder, their words directed with intention, daring anyone to stop them. Some families leaned in closer, trying to shield their children from hearing, while others froze in silence, hoping it would pass. Then the men left their stools and turned toward a young couple at a nearby table. One leaned too close over the woman's shoulder, his laugh sharp and ugly as he made comments that left her stiff with fear. Her boyfriend, voice strained but polite, asked them to leave her alone. Instead of backing down, the tallest man reached forward, his hand closing on her arm as his friends laughed behind him. In an instant, the comfort of a quiet Friday meal shifted into something darker, a night where normal life collided with the looming shadow of threat. Emily Carter sat in her corner booth, the one she had chosen for its view of the entire dining room. To anyone else it was just another seat, but for her it was a calculated position. From there she could see both exits, the kitchen hallway and the bar. She had slipped into the habit years ago, a reflex born from deployments where knowing the layout could mean survival. Even in civilian clothes, with a plate of pasta in front of her, the discipline never left. She ate slowly, her fork steady, while her eyes moved through the room without drawing attention. The restaurant buzzed with the kind of background chatter that made a city feel alive. Silverware clinked, couples laughed in hushed tones, and waiters carried trays between the tables. Still, Emily caught every movement at the bar. The 3 men had grown louder, their voices pressing against the soft rhythm of the room. They leaned against each other, careless, their laughter edged with something sharper. The bartender glanced toward the manager once, then lowered his head, polishing glasses that did not need it. The staff slipped behind the counter, hoping the storm would pass on its own. Across the room, families stopped mid-bite. Parents pulled children closer, couples looked down into their drinks, and silence spread in pockets of unease. The men had turned their attention to a young couple near the center. The woman was barely out of her 20s, her dress light and simple, her shoulders stiff as one of the men leaned too close. His words were low but carried enough to reach nearby tables, crude remarks that brought a flush of fear to her face. Her boyfriend tried to respond, his voice tight, asking them to move on. The request only made the laughter louder. The tallest man reached out, his hand wrapping around the young woman's arm, pulling her from her chair. The scrape of wood on tile echoed louder than any words. Her companion froze, caught between fear and the urge to protect, his face pale with panic. No waiter stepped forward. No one at another table moved. Phones hovered, but no one acted. The restaurant that had felt safe only minutes earlier now held its breath, paralyzed. The young woman's eyes darted across the room, searching, pleading. Then they found Emily. For a moment, the noise, the laughter, and the fear all seemed to narrow to that single glance. Wide, terrified eyes met the steady calm of someone who had seen worse and lived through it. It was not a spoken call, but it carried the same weight. Emily set her fork down, her muscles already tensing. The decision had been made before she ever stood. Emily Carter pushed her chair back slowly, the scrape of wood on tile cutting through the tension of the room. She rose with steady posture, not rushed, not hesitant. Every step toward the bar was measured, her eyes fixed on the man gripping the young woman's arm. The chatter that had filled the restaurant only minutes before had collapsed into silence. Diners watched her cross the floor as if time had slowed, the sound of her heels soft against the tile. She stopped just close enough for her voice to carry without raising it. Her tone was even calm and direct. Let her go. The words cut the air in a way no one expected. The three men turned, their faces twisted with surprise before melting into mockery. The tallest one looked her up and down, his smirk growing wider as if the sight of a woman no taller than 5'4" was amusing. Another laughed and leaned closer, his breath heavy with alcohol. "Sweetheart, you don't want this. Go back to your table." His friend joined in, tilting his head as if weighing her. The laughter was meant to push her back, to remind her of the size difference, the strength they believed they held. One of them stepped forward, closing the distance with a cocky swagger. He stretched his hand out, pressing it against her shoulder with the casual arrogance of someone certain she would fold. Emily did not flinch. Her stance did not shift. Her breathing stayed even, and her eyes never broke from his. The moment that hand touched her was the last second of calm. The line had been crossed, and her body was already prepared to answer. The man's hand pressed against Emily Carter's shoulder for only a heartbeat before she moved. In one sharp motion, she caught his wrist, twisted it against the joint, and pulled him forward. His body folded as his balance broke, and she redirected his weight down to the floor. The impact echoed, a heavy thud that silenced the scattered laughter. The second man lunged, fists raised. Emily pivoted sideways, sliding just far enough to avoid his swing. Her hand struck the side of his neck at a pressure point drilled into her muscle memory from years of combatives. His knees buckled instantly, sending him crashing into a nearby table. Plates and glasses shattered across the tile as he slumped forward, groaning. The third man hesitated only a moment before trying to bolt for the door. Emily shifted to block his path, her stance steady, her eyes locked. As he shoved at her, she hooked his arm, redirected his forward momentum, and sent him sprawling face first across the entryway. His body skidded, then stilled, leaving him dazed and stunned on the ground. The entire fight had lasted barely 15 seconds. Diners who had been frozen in fear now stared in disbelief, their silence broken only by the sound of bodies hitting the floor and glass crunching underfoot. Three men who had dominated the room were now incapacitated, scattered across the restaurant, in different states of pain. Emily stood in the center, calm and unshaken, her breathing controlled, her posture relaxed. For the first time that night, the restaurant was silent. Emily Carter did not linger over the three men sprawled across the floor. She turned to the young couple instead, her voice steady and low as she asked if they were hurt. The woman shook her head, her breath uneven, while her boyfriend stammered that they were fine. Emily gave a short nod, her eyes scanning the room again before focusing back on them. "You are safe now," she said with the calm certainty of someone who meant it. The manager hurried forward, his hands wringing the edge of his apron. He thanked her quickly, his relief clear. but his eyes darted toward the front door as he muttered about needing to call the police. He worried aloud about damage to the restaurant, about liability if things had gone worse. Emily listened without argument, then replied that it was the right thing to do, that the call needed to be made. Her tone carried the assurance of someone who understood procedures and consequences. Behind them, one of the attackers groaned as he tried to sit up. His face twisted in anger as he pointed at Emily and shouted that she had attacked them for no reason. His voice cracked, the alcohol mixing with fear as he accused her of starting everything. The other two men tried to echo the claim, but their words fell flat against the silence of the room. An elderly man at a nearby table rose to his feet, his cane pressed firmly against the floor. He raised his voice so everyone could hear, saying he had watched from the beginning, that those men had harassed the young woman and laid hands on her before Emily stepped in. His words carried the weight of authority, the kind that silenced excuses. A middle-aged woman added her voice, saying her daughter had been afraid to go to the restroom because of the men's behavior. Heads nodded across the room, voices joining, and the story became undeniable. Phones were lifted as people began recording the aftermath, their fear replaced with awe. What had been chaos now felt like history being captured, proof that someone had stood up when no one else could. The shift in mood spread quickly, diners murmuring gratitude, staff whispering relief as the weight of danger lifted. Emily stood quietly in the center, composed, while the balance of truth turned in her favor. The restaurant, once frozen in fear, now breathed again. The wail of sirens outside pulled every eye toward the entrance. A moment later, 3 San Diego police officers stepped inside, their boots crunching over shattered glass. Their eyes swept across overturned chairs, broken plates, and the 3 men slumped against the wall. Years of patrol work showed in the way they paused, silently reading the scene before speaking. One officer asked loudly what had happened, pulling out a notepad. The largest of the men pointed at Emily and declared she had attacked them for no reason. His voice shook, but he tried to sound convincing. The other 2 backed him up, nodding as if they had rehearsed the story in the seconds before police arrived. Before their words could settle, voices rose from the crowd. Diners spoke quickly, contradicting every claim. An elderly man insisted he had seen the men grab a young woman first. A mother said her daughter had been too frightened to leave the table. The manager added that the men had harassed staff for nearly an hour. Each account lined up, cutting down the attacker's version before it could take root. The officers listened carefully, asking follow-up questions, but their attention shifted often toward Emily. She stood apart, calm and steady, not raising her voice, not flinching under the accusations. Most people after a fight showed adrenaline in shaking hands or quick words. She showed neither. Her breathing was even, her eyes sharp, her answers short and precise. One of the officers studied her for a long moment, noting her posture, the way she scanned the room even now. It was not how civilians usually carried themselves. Something about her composure suggested a different background, one built on training and discipline. The officer did not press further yet, but the respect in his gaze made it clear he already suspected she was not ordinary. An officer stepped closer, his notepad still in hand but his tone softer than before. He asked Emily Carter to give her version of events. She spoke clearly, outlining how the men had been drinking heavily, harassing patrons, and then physically grabbing a young woman. Her account was precise, every detail delivered in steady order without hesitation. She described how she first gave verbal commands to de-escalate before any physical action. Her words matched the testimonies already given, but her control made them feel sharper, almost clinical. The officer studied her as she finished, then asked if she had any kind of formal self-defense training. For a brief moment, Emily hesitated, her expression unchanged, but her eyes thoughtful. She finally replied in a calm voice that she had some military background. She did not elaborate, offering nothing more. To anyone else, it might have sounded modest, even dismissive. The officer nodded slowly, but his eyes told a different story. He had seen fights end with wild emotion, fear, or anger. She displayed none of that. Her composure, her precision, even the way she stood apart from the noise suggested discipline at a level most people never reached. He closed his notebook, thanked her for her cooperation, and stepped back. The question of who she really was lingered in the air, unspoken but heavy, leaving the diners with the sense that this woman was no ordinary veteran. Within hours, the first cell phone clips hit social media. Shaky footage caught Emily Carter rising from her booth, stepping into the confrontation, and in seconds putting 3 men on the ground. The video spread from private group chats to public feeds, where captions repeated the same line over and over. The whole fight lasted only 15 seconds. That detail became the hook, drawing millions of views before morning. News stations picked it up next. Local anchors replayed the moment frame by frame, their voices filled with surprise as they described how a quiet diner had turned into a scene of sudden discipline and precision. By the next day, national networks were running the story, labeling her the mystery woman in black who dismantled 3 attackers. Clips looped across breakfast shows while commentators debated how she had done it. The story gained even more traction when a former Marine turned military blogger posted his analysis. He slowed the footage, circling the exact moment she applied a wrist lock, the second she redirected momentum into a clean takedown, and the strike to a pressure point that brought a man to his knees. He wrote that these moves were not random. They were controlled, deliberate techniques used in close-quarters defense training reserved for special operations. His breakdown went viral, shared by veterans who recognized the skill in every motion. Public fascination grew as more people joined the conversation. Some viewers admired her restraint, pointing out how she used the minimum force necessary. Others speculated about her background, debating whether she was a martial arts instructor, a cop, or someone with deeper training. The restaurant's security footage confirmed what the phones had captured. 3 men incapacitated in under 15 seconds by a woman who never raised her voice and never lost her composure. The clips had begun as a shocking piece of video, but within days they had sparked a national conversation about courage, training, and the hidden strength of those who live quietly among us. Emily Carter reported to base on Monday morning, the weight of the weekend's headlines following her through the gate. She was told to meet with her commanding officer at 0800, and she arrived exactly on time, uniform pressed and bearing no trace of the viral storm outside. Inside the office. Captain Reynolds gestured for her to sit, his desk covered with printed news clippings and highlighted reports from public affairs. His expression was serious but not angry, more curious about her side of the story. Emily recounted the incident with the same precision she had shown the night it happened. She explained how the men escalated from harassment to physical assault, how she gave verbal commands first, and how she used only the force required to end the threat. She emphasized that she acted as a private citizen, not under orders, and not representing the Navy in any official capacity. Her tone never wavered. Her words lined up like pieces in a well-documented report. The captain leaned back and listened carefully, then finally nodded. He said she had done everything by the book, that her judgment had been sound and her restraint clear. He pointed out that the public was seeing a positive reflection of Navy training through her actions, a reminder that discipline and professionalism do not end at the base. He acknowledged that the Navy rarely welcomed media attention of this kind, but in this case it showed the country what its sailors were capable of in any environment. Emily remained composed, offering no pride, only acknowledgement. The captain closed the file in front of him and looked directly at her, reminding her that she had earned respect not only from civilians but also from those who understood what real training looked like. For the first time in the discussion, he said her full title aloud, letting it hang in the air. Chief Petty Officer Emily Carter, Navy SEAL. The recognition was both official and personal, sealing her identity as far more than the mystery woman in a restaurant. The 3 men were taken into custody that same night, their injuries minor compared to the charges waiting for them. At the station, the accounts of more than a dozen witnesses matched the security footage, leaving little room for dispute. By the time the case reached court, the narrative was clear. They were not victims. They were aggressors who had turned a restaurant into a scene of fear. The prosecutor charged them with assault, battery, and disturbing the peace. During the hearings, the young woman they had targeted testified about being grabbed and pulled from her chair. Her words carried the same weight as the video played for the jury, showing the moment she struggled and the instant Emily stepped forward. The defense attempted to claim they were drunk and meant no real harm, but the evidence was overwhelming. The judge sentenced the ringleader to 6 months in jail, followed by 2 years of probation and mandatory anger management. The second man received 4 months behind bars, probation, and community service. The third avoided jail by pleading guilty, but he was placed under supervised probation and ordered into counseling programs. All 3 were required to pay restitution for damages to the restaurant and medical costs tied to their own injuries. The consequences stretched far beyond the courtroom. One man, a corporate executive, was immediately suspended and later fired after his company cited its zero-tolerance policy for harassment. Another lost his position at a law firm, his license damaged by the conviction. The third, who worked in finance, had his certification revoked, ending his career. Their reputations crumbled as their names appeared in local papers and online searches. What began as a night of arrogance and intimidation ended with jobs lost, futures derailed, and permanent records that marked them as offenders. Justice had caught up, and the fallout was as lasting as the memory of that night. Emily Carter's story spread far beyond San Diego. News outlets across the country carried the footage, turning it from a viral clip into a national conversation. Recruitment offices reported a spike in young women asking about service, inspired by the idea that someone small and quiet could stand up against overwhelming odds. The Navy received letters from families thanking Emily for showing their daughters that courage was not limited by size or gender. Scholarship foundations moved quickly, launching programs in her name for women entering military academies or pursuing careers in defense. Documentarians contacted her unit, proposing films that highlighted not only her actions but the broader role of women in special operations. Though many requests were declined, the message still spread, shaping how the public viewed service and sacrifice. Veterans groups used her story at events, describing it as proof that training and discipline had value far beyond the battlefield. At the restaurant, the owner installed a bronze plaque on the booth where she had sat. It read that, on that night, one woman had shown what it meant to protect others without hesitation. Diners pointed it out to their children, and the story became part of the restaurant's history. Across the country, martial arts and self-defense schools reported more women signing up, many saying they had been moved by the viral video. Some carried the article in their phones as motivation to walk through the door. Through it all, Emily stayed the same. She avoided interviews and brushed off the idea of being a celebrity. When pressed, she explained in simple words that she did what anyone should do when others are in danger. Her humility reinforced the respect people already felt. One night in a restaurant had created ripples that touched an entire nation, and yet she carried it with the quiet conviction of a sailor who had never needed recognition to know the value of her actions. Heroes do not always walk in parades or wear uniforms where everyone can see them. Many live quietly among us, sitting in restaurants, standing in line at the grocery store, or walking down the street. Their courage is not measured by size or by how loud they are. It is shown in the moment when they choose to step forward while everyone else holds back. Emily Carter reminded the country that courage can look ordinary until the instant it is needed most. She did not act for praise, and she did not wait for someone else. She saw danger. She read the fear in another person's eyes, and she moved. That choice is what separates bystanders from protectors. As you think about her story, ask yourself what you would do if you saw someone in need. Real courage is not about recognition. It is about responsibility. Share your thoughts. Reflect on the heroes in your own life. And if you want to hear more stories that remind us of the quiet strength around us, subscribe and stay connected. Courage can be quiet, but it changes lives forever.